Welcome back to the Nearly Enlightened podcast. I am your host, Giana. Today, I am joined by my internet friend, my soul sister, Deirdre, also known as Dee, the owner of Anahata Yoga and Sistar. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
I am so excited you're here. So a little bit about our connection. So we were connected through our friend Jamie Gray, and Jamie is the soulpreneur coach. She's been mentioned so many times on this podcast. I'm dying to have her on, but she is about to have a baby. So after that, hopefully we'll get her on. But we were connected through her soulpreneur community. And I love everything you're doing. And I wanted to give you a space to highlight that. And it's funny because we have a lot of parallels. Like we both grew up in New England. We're both from Italian descent. And funniest, I don't know if you even know this, I also went to Johnson & Wales.
What?
Yes, I graduated a few years after you guys. Because I think, were you in Jamie's class?
I wasn't. I think I was. Wait, this is crazy.
I know.
What? No, I think, because I was in the class, I think even after Mary, her sister.
I think I graduated because I took some time off and I did not have your parallel normal.
Well, no one at Johnson & Wales does.
Yeah, exactly. So I graduated, I think, in 2015.
Okay. Yeah, no, I graduated early in 2009.
Oh, so I was in high school.
Yeah. Okay.
That was my senior year.
That's
but
crazy.
Anyways, and then we also have the yoga background. So just so many parallels. It's so funny. I had to share that with you. So what I want to start talking about is Deirdre's really started her after you graduated early. You started in the Peace Corps and you ended up in Panama, which is where you are now. So you just want to talk about that a little and what that was like to travel around and work with the Peace Corps?
Sure. Yeah. So I actually, I heard about Peace Corps. I didn't know what it was. And it came out of, guess whose mouth? Jamie Gray.
Of course.
And and that was, and I think I had a couple of friends too that were looking into it and stuff, but I had never heard of it. And just by knowing the name, not even looking into what it was or, etc., I was like, I have to do that. I don't know what it is, but I know that is a calling, but I have to answer. And so the more I was looking into it and even working with a recruiter, I was like, yeah, no, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I actually graduated early. I tried to do all my credits at Johnson & Wales early, which they're super flexible. I do respect and appreciate that college about the college. And I graduated early and I left Peace Corps before any of my friends graduated, I think. And it was, so I was assigned to Panama because they assign you depending on your skill set and what the world or the certain areas need, that's where you are sent. And so I was doing, I think officially they call it a community environmental conservation extension agent. That's a mouthful, right? So it was a lot of, just to give you a brief, what I was working with was, I worked a lot in the schools. So doing environmental education in the schools with the kids. Me and a couple of my girlfriends got together and we were building ecological stoves. So giving workshops and helping
amazing.
People. Yeah, it was really, really fun. And just, teaching people how to do time management and all different kinds of things. It really allows you to use your own skill set to help the members of the community. So I fell in love with the land. I fell in love with the people. I fell in love with the man, all the things. And so that's, just to give you a brief synopsis there, that's kind of how I ended up back down here.
Oh, that's amazing. Because it says here you traveled to over 17 countries. So you really traveled a lot.
So I while I was at Johnson and Wales, I was studying travel and tourism. And that's actually how I met Jamie and Mary and, got to know them.
The world is so small.
It's so small. And during that time, I opted to do a study abroad in Switzerland, and it was awesome. So a lot of those like 17 countries I was able to visit while I was living in Switzerland for a trimester, because in Europe during that time, I'm not sure how it is now. I would assume it's somewhat similar. The Euro pass, like every weekend, and because Johnson and Wales, you have like a 4-day weekend, like we would just take a train and wake up in another country. And I feel so blessed and so grateful that I was able to have that experience, because it just, they say like the only thing that makes you richer is by spending money on travel.
It's totally true. Like I also, I went to Johnson and Wales for a different major, and that's like a whole other story. But I traveled through the summer all over Europe with 2 of my cousins. And it was also in that like college. I think I was 21. I had just turned 21. And that was such a life-changing experience for me to like be on my own. I mean, I had my cousins with me, so that was comforting, but to like be traveling around and be young, and like we just said yes to everything. And it was just such an enriching experience. And I get that it costs money to do that. And, people could say that that's a privilege, and it totally is, but by any means necessary, like travel, make that happen, because what you learn, the people you meet, like just being immersed in other cultures, and to realize that there's like something outside of this United States bubble is just like, you really can't put it to words.
You can't, you really, really can't. And I think that that's why, to be honest, after college, nothing I feel like I have done in my life is traditional. And
I can relate.
Yeah. Not having the corporate 9 to 5 and then coming right into Peace Corps, and really, as you say, like immersing into a culture to the point where I didn't even speak Spanish very well at all. I was communicating with my hands at the beginning. I was like novice Spanish. And I think, I had a very difficult time leaving the Peace Corps, going back to the United States, because I was like, this is not how my soul is supposed to live. And I think that that's being able to unlearn, and please, by any means, I do not have anything figured out. I learn every single day, but I am very happy that when I do hear the voice inside, the intuition, I listen. And that is how I got to where I am today.
I think that is like the most important thing to know there is like following your intuition. Like I have almost always done that. And I've made certain decisions and people think I've absolutely lost my mind. And like even coming to Arizona was one of those moments, but it was funny because like 3 months before I moved here, I was here visiting, and I was kind of like, who the fuck would live here and like why? And then like 3 months later,
I love Arizona.
3 months later, I'm making plans to move here. And in my mind, I'm only going to be here for 4 months. And like, surprise, now it's 3 years later. And it's like something inside was just saying like, there's something there for you. You have to get, like, just by any means necessary, you have to get there. And it's funny, as I was starting to make the decisions and like put things into place to come here, everything happened so smoothly, to the point where it's almost like, is this too good to be true? Like, what's happening here? Because everything fell into place so easily. And it was just like, I was expecting some kind of pushback or just like some sort of challenge in getting here. And there was really none. So I was like, okay, this just affirms like, this is what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. And it's so beautiful when you're in that flow, and it's just, sometimes I feel like you don't even recognize or realize until after the fact. And I think listening to that voice and following the intuition and following your heart, when it is in that flow state, it's incredible. It's like when you are showing by following your intuition and your heart, showing up for yourself, that's when the magic happens. Teachers are going to fall into your lap. You know, your like opportunities are going to fall in front of you, and it feels really good. And it's not like that forever, but
No.
it's, you know,
and sometimes it's not easy getting to that place either. Like I know when I was coming here, it was kind of like I was at that breaking point where I had been in limbo for so long, and it was like excruciating. Like I couldn't wait for whatever to happen. And so when things started to fall into place, it's such a comforting feeling knowing like you're held in a supported state.
Yeah.
And that flow state is really, it feels so good to be there when it's like, okay, I'm on the right path and everything is just flowing the way it should be.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, you know, it's obviously it's easier to practice gratitude when you're in that.
Yes.
And I feel like the real challenge is when you're not there. Okay, where's your gratitude? It's still got to be there, you know, which is such a challenge, but that's where it goes.
Yeah. And I think those challenging moments are like what kind of shows us who we are too. Like when I was finishing up my 500-hour RYT, the last 300 hours, our teacher had us do a gratitude journal every single day, write 5 things that we were grateful for. And in the beginning, it was so challenging to do, to like wake up and the first thing you do is like start journaling what you're grateful for. And the longer that the time period went on, it became way easier. Because gratitude practice isn't always an easy practice.
No way. It's, you know, but that's why it's a practice.
Yeah, exactly. Practice makes progress. Or one of my friends says practice makes practice easier. And I love that.
Oh, I love that too.
So how did you come to your yoga journey through like all of this? Was it during that period or after?
So yes, it's both, all of it. I will try to make it as short and sweet as I possibly can, because I feel like let's see. So as I mentioned previously, I was having my transition from Peace Corps back to the States. You know, they help you out to get there with, you know, a readjustment allowance and other such things. And I feel like I couldn't relate to anyone. I was having a really hard time. I think that was the biggest challenge for me. And
yeah, like how do you integrate after something like so life-changing?
Yeah. And I'm sure that they have support groups and stuff. I think I was just like this. My blinders were on a little bit. And I ended up in taking yoga classes because I was like, I don't even know, like, what do I do? And I was like, what is yoga? I'm going to just go and breathe. And so I went to my first class and I felt something in my body and in my mind that I was just kind of like, I have no idea what just happened. And I wasn't happy. I wasn't this, I wasn't that. I knew something was going on. And I was like, okay, that like the curiosity about it, I think helped me come back. And just having someone else tell me what to do with my body, where to put my hand, how to breathe. It was like, got me out of here, got me out of my head, back into my body. And, you know, and that's just the asana. That's just the asana. I know we've spoken about this. Like there are 8
That's just like the gateway.
Yes.
I've talked about that on previous podcasts, and until you really experience it, I don't think you get it, but that it truly is the threshold into a whole new world. Yes.
And I just remember like, as I was showing up for myself, okay, then I actually started going to you know, cognitive behavioral therapy, and like just kind of kept showing up for myself, and then things kept going. And then I remember one day I was leaving class and I sat in my car and it makes me emotional even thinking about it. I just burst into tears. And I texted a picture of my like ugly cry face to my mother. And I was like, I am so happy right now. And I was like, I remember promising myself, I want to do this for the rest of my life so that no one else that comes into my class or what have you feels as alone as I have felt. And that's where it started. So my practice just, it was just like continuously practicing. But I knew I had to take a teacher training at some point. And, things happen, life happens. I moved down to Panama, which is a whole nother story in itself. And I was working on an organic farm. And I was out to eat at a restaurant with my boyfriend, and I saw this like YTT poster on how they have sometimes like attack. What are those things called? Like
the little like community boards.
Bulletin boards. Yeah. And I was like, I have to do this. This is my chance. And so I like sat down the owners of the farm, and I was like, look, this is something that I need to do. Like my soul is aching for it. Can I please have a month off? And they were so kind, and they let me, gave me the time off, and I did it here in Panama. And
that is amazing.
Yeah, it was.
And really I think like backing up a little, one of the most important things that you touched on is showing up for yourself. Like, I think that's so important to note that like no one is going to save you. Like you need to be there for yourself. And I think not even sometimes, all the times, that's the hardest part, is like diving into that wound and feeling what it feels like to be there with that uncomfortable feeling, like whatever is coming up, and being like, okay, how do I pull myself out of this? And sometimes that's not even the thought. It's just like, okay, I'm going to go to yoga because for those 75 minutes, this is what makes me feel better.
Yep. Yeah, totally.
So after that teacher training experience, like what were your next kind of like steps, or where did the universe guide you?
Well, it was interesting because it was, just to kind of keep rolling with this theme of showing up for yourself. I was delivering vegetables to a woman, and she has MS, and I told her, I'm not going to be able to drop off veggies for the next month. I'm doing a YTT. And the next time I went to drop stuff off, she handed me a book by Ingar, and it said yoga for MS. And she's like, when do we start?
Oh my God, I have goosebumps.
Yeah. And so it was like, it was like, how they say, like when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. For me, It's been both ways, always. Because I feel like, and I'm sure you can connect, or this will resonate with you, like I feel like I receive so much more than I give when I teach. And it's such a blessing. And so that kind of started because I was still working at the farm. So I would do private classes with a few people, and that's kind of where I am right now. I started my business in 2019, and it's called Anahata Yoga and Being a Star. For a few different reasons, but I wanted.
Yeah. So for people who might not know what Anahata means, or like, what does that mean, and how did that name come to be?
Okay. So there are in our chakra system, we have this set. I believe there's like over 200 chakras, I think, in total, but the 7 main ones, I think people who are listening will more or less have a familiarity with it. And Anahata is our heart chakra. And I feel like for me, I had this own personal saying, use your mind, but follow your heart.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. And I think it's, it's the middle chakra between the 3 upper and the 3 lower. So it's connecting, all of the whole body. And I really believe that, when people think about the heart, they think about love. And I also, when I think about the heart, I also feel like that's, for some of us, maybe where we carry a lot of our samskaras or a lot of our own wounds, we hold them there. And I think for me personally, that's just been my journey. And I think that's what I call myself a heart and health guide, because I think it is so important to tap into that space. So that's kind of where the name came from me, I guess.
I love that. In addition to yoga, you're also a holistic health coach. So what what is a holistic health coach and how could it be beneficial to work with one?
So holistic, I guess, wellness, I even feel kind of silly using that word now because I feel like it's become such a fad word out in the world right now. But that's also what bienestar means in Spanish. Because I knew when I opened my business, like I didn't, like we were just saying, like yoga is just an asana that, you know, in the mainstream, people think yoga, oh, asana, the postures.
Yep.
And I think even yoga, it's so much more than that. And so I think
Yes.
being a star, having wellness is just like, that's just one piece of your own wellness. And so holistic health for me, from my point of view, you know, there's 4 different facets. There's spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical. So, you know, you could have some symptoms in your body physically that might be connected to certain emotions or past trauma showing its face. And I think that it's really important when we are on our healing journey that we look into those 4 areas. We look into that wheel of holistic health and really spend time in each quadrant. Because in order to be well, like for me, myself, I was going through a really difficult time a couple years ago, and I was, you know, living on an organic farm, eating kale up the wazoo, like had all these things at my fingertips, and I was not well. I was just one of the owner had passed away, and she was a maternal figure in my life, and I was just, so my, you know, my mental and emotional body was not well, and it was coming out on my face. I broke out everywhere. It was, you know, I was like, why is this happening to me? All these zits, blah blah blah, I'm eating well. No, like all the kale in the world is not going to save you. You've got to really tap in to all these different quadrants of your, you know, your environment, your inner environment, your outer environment, what you're seeing every day, the news. If you watch news, what are you listening to? What's coming in your ears? You know, I think there's a lot of things that people that are really simple that maybe we've just completely lost touch with, that having a holistic health coach could help you bring you back into your body, bring you back into your heart, and just help you guide. You know, I'm not, there's that saying where it's like, I have all these tools in my toolbox, right? Yoga teacher, this, that, and the other thing. And what is it? Jack of all trades, but master of none.
Yep.
But it's like, those are pieces that have helped me on my journey. And I feel for me in my work, I am here to help you guide yourself, and I'm here to help empower you to take the next steps and find what's going to work for you and help you, because I know you've mentioned before on this podcast, health is bio individual. What works for me is not going to work for you, is not going to work for him, is not going to work for her. So it's like spending time with each person, you know. And I love one-on-ones. I love it. And I love getting to know somebody deep enough to really help and guide them. And so like, I feel the work that I do, that's where I would go. That's where I would guide people.
I think that's so important to highlight because you and a few others have touched on it on this podcast. Being a guide in this life, a healer, a yoga teacher, whatever you want to call it, it's not about us. It's about empowering the individual that we're working with to find in themselves what they need. And it's really about being a guide and not like people. I think the modern community has made this such a trend, such a fad, that there's a lot of ego involved. And for all of you to come on here and say that this is just your journey, this is what works for you, and this is how you guide other people, I think that is so important to note, because we're not doing any of the healing for you. If that's what you're here for, like, I am not your person.
Yeah.
And that's so comforting to hear, because in the social media world, you know, in the mainstream, I think we see a lot of that in in people who are in this community.
Yeah. 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 And I think it's true, you know, like you get a headache. Oh, let me pop a pill for that. This person is offering this healing. Oh, they're going to help me. You know, it's like, no, I am going to help guide yourself
Yes.
into what you need.
Because
And
there's
I
no
think
quick fix to healing. Like,
oh God, no. It is, and it's not a linear process.
Nope.
You're going to be up and you're going to be down and you're going to be all over the place. And it's just going to be on and on and on until we transition.
yes. Yeah. Yep. Because I think too, like you get in that flow state and you think, okay, I reached this plateau. I'm going to cruise here for a while. And it's like, nope. As soon as you get comfortable there, spirit is like, oh, but let me show you this layer.
Yeah. Let me open this door. Let me peel back this layer. Yeah. No, I think it's, you know, it's a long process. And I think you just have to, like we were saying, be grateful in the good, be grateful in the bad. And that's
It's
what's
all
gonna
temporary.
yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
So
For
something
sure.
else I want to highlight that so for those of you who don't know, like when a guest is coming on, I send out a little form just to like know a little bit more about them. And something that I want to talk about that you wrote in here was that you stopped drinking and that had a profound change in your overall health. So I want to talk about this because if anyone follows me on social media, you might have noticed that I think yesterday or the day before, well, now it won't be yesterday, but at some point in time, I shared something about alcohol and how that really affects your brain. It affects your hormones, your gut, like so many things. And for so many of us in this culture, like I think that we lean on alcohol heavily. So I want to talk about that a little bit because what is it like to kind of have that realization and stop drinking?
So this is going to be the second time, Giana, and I appreciate this opportunity to ever speak this out loud in public. It's been something because it was a very difficult transition for me to make, to be completely vulnerable and transparent.
No, I can totally relate.
Yeah. And so I haven't had a drink in over 5 years.
Wow.
And I listened to the intuition. I heard spirit say to me, you don't have to drink anymore. It wasn't angry. It wasn't like I had this rock bottom. It was not a dramatic thing. I guess you could say it that way, but the way that it showed up in my life is I was out with my boyfriend and I had 2 passion fruit margaritas and I was like, afterwards I was like, I don't really feel good. And I was like, can we go to the cafe and like get a coffee or something with like, which like now as a gut health teacher, I'm like, what? But we went
stimulant on stimulant.
Yeah. And so as soon as I took a sip of coffee, I heard the voice and I was like, okay, like, I guess I'm done. And the next day I walked into my 200-hour RYTT and I was held in a container of 8 other people who held me and respected me and encouraged my choice. And it was like, I had never been in an environment like that before. It was so new to me. It was so new to me. And so it was like one day after the other, I can do this one day after the other. And then it just like, it was very hard, but it got easier over time. And, peeling back these layers of like, who is Dee without drinking? Who is she? I am still to this day trying to understand.
Yeah, because
trying to
going
find
into
myself.
a social situation, and I know like your background is Italian and so is mine. And I mean, my family, they're not big drinkers, but wine is a huge part of our culture. And like that social, like I'm gonna be with my family, like I'm gonna have some homemade wine or
yeah,
like my family likes, my mom is kind of she's the drinker. But my dad was never really like, he was always like one drink and that is it. Like maybe two. Like I think I've seen him drunk once, and it was when we went to Mexico. But it's still a big part of our culture. And even when I was in college, I actually lived in the same building as my paternal grandparents, and they were still very much into their Italian culture as if they were still there in Italy. And I loved that about them. And like, as soon as I would go down to eat, like I would go there to eat like 2 or 3 times a week. And like the first thing my grandfather would do would be pour me a glass of wine. And so like, how do you, I think that's challenging for a lot of people, is to go into those social situations, because the first thing, when you're not drinking, the first thing that somebody else who is drinking does is, why aren't you drinking?
Yep. And forgiving. I am still, again, to this day, I'll say this a million times for a million different things, forgiving myself.
That's harder than forgiving other people.
Oh man. Yeah. The shame, the guilt, the anger. There's so many emotions, because with alcohol, it's easy to shove it down, forget that, and I think I had a couple of friends who would come over, or after, I was comfortable saying like, yeah, no, I'm not drinking anymore. Well, I remember one of my best friends brought over an alcohol-free wine or something. Like, the people who really love and respect you are going to show up for you and support you, and not, make you feel like your decision is wrong, or you shouldn't say that you're sober, or you should, I think it's, and that's, I've never joined a group, and that's another thing I would recommend is, don't do it by yourself. And I think,
but you just did it in a slightly different way, because I think a 200-hour RYT container, like that could be, that's very healing in itself. Like the journey that you go through in a 200-hour is just beyond words, really. And I'm also speaking from experience there. Like my first 200-hour literally shifted the entire trajectory of my life.
Yeah. And it is, it's a healing space. Hopefully the facilitator is going to set that up.
Yep.
And it's going to be a transformative experience. It is a complete transformation. I'm so grateful that I was able to accomplish that, and to have the people, that were there with me. I hold them so close in my heart. And after I did stop, and you get through, there's all these feelings and things. And I'm, my partner doesn't drink either, and so having him be there as a support was really big for me. And I think health-wise, even made a huge difference. And I started remembering things, like things that happened when I was younger that are wounds. And I was like, oh, okay. I understand now why maybe having a drink made you feel better, or this or that. It was like, just it was definitely a step in my spiritual path, and I don't like to put myself in a box or anything, like, oh, I'm never going to drink again. Like, right now, it is not for me. It is not for me right now. And that's the way I describe it for myself. I think everyone has their own journey. If you want to join AA or other groups, I think that it's a great resource. The way you want to do it, or just take a month off and see what happens to your mind, to your body, and just know yourself without that.
Or even like you said, it's, excuse me, like the gut health, it's
huge.
You're killing all of your microbiome.
Huge.
Or even like now I notice my boyfriend and I don't really drink either. Sorry, I'm going to have to get a water.
That's okay.
Sorry, people, I don't edit this podcast. My boyfriend and I don't really drink anymore either. And like every once in a while we'll have like one one something like margarita or whatever. And I noticed that even that one, like the feeling is so crazy. Like I get an instant hangover, like the minute after I'm done drinking. Like, and so I've kind of come to the conclusion, like, why am I even doing this to myself at this point? Like, I don't even enjoy it anymore. So that's just,
I think it's too, like
interesting to
you
look at.
Yeah, I think like what you said, just to come full circle with it, is it's just so ingrained in Western culture in the US. Like, and I think it's, if you're not drinking and that's a problem, then the drinking's a problem.
Yeah.
It's not, and I think there are people who can limit themselves, and that's great. But I know for me, I did have a very hard relationship with it. And I think that, coming out and talking about it has even been difficult too, because it was a layer I had to see myself in first. Like, who is this new D? Like, what is she about? I don't even know. So how the hell am I going to tell you?
I think that's important to note too, though, is like, we're always kind of figuring out who we are. There's like, there's no huge, end. There's no end. And there's a huge unlearning process of like, okay, I drink because society has told us that as adults we drink. Like,
yeah.
And I think it's important to look at, I talk about this in a previous podcast as well, which to date right now, as we're talking about it, it's not out yet. It's coming out Monday. But are we chasing the dopamine high? Like, are we having a drink because we're out to dinner and you are sipping on something? It's like an embodied experience. Or are you coming home from work and you had a shit day and you're like, I need a drink? Like, I think it's important to note that, like, why do we drink? Are we drinking to shove things down? Are we drinking to like ease our mind? Which, like, fun fact, like the next day you're going to feel more anxiety than you did to start with. So like, what are you using it for? So I think that's always interesting to look at too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So transitioning a little, but I guess it kind of goes with gut health as well. You spent time farming, and now you actually own a farm. Is that correct?
So, well, it's so funny. I was talking with a good friend about this, like, partner. I get the word, but it sounds so like businessy. Like, my other half, my beloved, he has I guess we have 5 hectares of land. And I started off when I came back down here, working for a couple in their organic farm, helped them achieve their organic certification, which is a really cool process to do because that's kind of new down here in Panama. And so, Edgardo, this is what he's done his whole life.
That's amazing.
Produce. And it's been really interesting to watch and to grow alongside of him, because I think, I have a organic farming and sustainable food and farming certification from UMass. And I learned a lot during that process. I learned a lot in Peace Corps. I learned a lot. I was living at Heifer International in Rutland, Massachusetts, when I got out of Peace Corps.
I went there as a junior in high school. It used to be called the Junior Experience, and it's unfortunate because I don't think that the school that I went to does that anymore. But we went there and we like spent the day there, and we each got broken up into groups, and like I actually helped birth a lamb, and it was like the craziest experience ever. And like little high school me was like a prissy, like not into that kind of stuff. And I was like, wow, like that was really laying the foundation. And I was like holding this baby lamb like moments after it was born, and it was just like the craziest experience. More parallels.
Yeah, more. Bring it in. No, every time I hear you speak, I'm like, I see myself in you, and I'm sure vice versa. And so it's really beautiful. One day I will meet you in person.
One day,
But
yes.
so like a lot of that education I had, my experience, and then bringing it down here to Panama, and then having Edgardo come from when I first came back down in 2016. There were signs in the pueblo that said like, I proudly use Miracle Grow or something, like just, like Monsanto signs. And I was like, what is this? Is this real? And, Edgardo hasn't used glyphosate in over 10 years, probably more than that on his farm. But now, as we learn about regenerative agriculture and like, what can we do to give back to the soil? What can we do to make our produce more? And it's not going to happen overnight. Like, to connect it to the body, that healing the land is going to take maybe a generation. And so that's like why we try to include our son in like feeding the cows and like, this is what we're doing. And because he's made such steps to, like, okay, what am I supposed to be doing with my soil right now? Because this plant's getting sick. And I think instead of treating the symptoms, they're not looking at the root causation. And so like, where are the physical roots of a plant? They're in the ground, right? What are you doing to help the ground? What are you doing to help fortify your soil? Because when you think about it, if there is no nutrients in your soil, what do you think is in the tomato that's growing on the vine? Like, what's in there?
Nothing.
It's just foam. And so I think sometimes it's easy for people to forget that connection, or even learn about. It's hard to learn about, or it's new to learn about. And I think it's really important for people to understand the education.
I have geeked out over this for like the last probably 10 years, like as I've come through my journey. And I came from a lineage of farmers that like left that behind to come to this country. And like, it's so funny because my dad tells me all the time, like, that's a really hard life. Like, you don't want that life. And it's like, but actually,
well, you can get back there, right? You can get back there. And I think that he's very right. I think the number, not to get like all somber, but the suicide rate of farmers is excruciatingly high.
Yeah.
Because it is very difficult.
So I'm sure you've heard of this, but for viewers or listeners who might not have, this is what happened in India. Monsanto went in and said, we're going to raise your crop yield, and like all you have to do is give us your heirloom seeds and we will help you create these like super farms. And that's not what happened. Their ancient practices were way better, yielded way more, and the farmers went back to Monsanto and said, no, we want to go back to our way of farming, give us our seed back. And they said, go fuck yourself. And that is what happened across India. So many farmers took their lives because they couldn't see a way out. And I think, first of all, like, how awful, how sad. And like, another thing to look at is like, why is Monsanto trying to do this? One of the documentaries, I don't know if you've seen it, Kiss the Ground. It absolutely changed my life.
Everyone needs to see it. Everyone needs to see that movie, that documentary.
It changed my life to the point where I was plant-based for 6 years. And because of that, I decided, I mean, it wasn't just because of that, but that was a big part of my deciding factor of like starting to add good quality beef back into my diet. And that was so life-changing for me. It literally shifted my health on a physical level. Yeah. And I didn't even know that I wasn't feeling 100%, which is so crazy, which I talk about that on the podcast with Katie.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a great podcast. Everyone needs to go listen to that. And it's a great documentary. Ricardo and I watched it while I was pregnant. And by the end we were both like, because it's not like there's that saying, the person who plants the seed that's never going to see the shade of that tree. Like, we have got to start planting trees and sowing seed for our kids. Yes. Even if you don't have children, for the next generations, because that is going to get lost if we do not get our shit together.
Or like, I always think about it this way is like, if we don't start to pave the road for the future generations, like that's the generations that's going to be taking care of our generation in our elder years. Like, is this the world that we want to live in? Like, and I think that documentary is so great because it's not a doom and gloom kind of like
No.
the earth is fucked and there's nothing we can do about it. It's like, okay, if we make steps to heal the soil, not only is our soil going to heal, we're going to have better crops, we're going to have more nutritious food, but guess what? It's also going to heal the air and the water. And that was so eye-opening for me.
Yeah. Yeah. They do it in such a way where it's digestible.
Yep.
So like, even if you're not in the agricultural like field of things, you can understand it. You can really see like, oh shit,
and it takes such small steps to start to support that. And like, I think our generation, we went into the grocery store and that's where our food comes from. Our food comes from the grocery store. And it's like, no, there are so many hands that go into getting the food to the grocery store. And like, we really need to look at that. And it's funny. My boyfriend, I've mentioned it on many podcasts before, I think, he's a chef. And he kind of did, not that he didn't think about these things before, but now we go through the grocery store and he's like, oh, well, there's canola oil in that.
I think
no, go ahead.
I think it's important, that's ingredients is a whole nother podcast, but I think like to what you're saying is like, we've come so detached from nature. We've come so, like, how can we teach our kids? Like, if you can't, as you were saying, like get back to farming and like buy a plot of land and build your, like have all your own food and yada, yada, yada. Like, what can you do? Here are some things you can do. You can grow basil out your kitchen window. You can find a farmer in your local area and support them. I guarantee you, any farmer in your area that you want to go and tour their farm or understand more about them is going to openly like have you there and excitingly tell you and share everything they have with you, because it's one of the most humble, noble jobs that I know. And I think there's like you're saying, easy steps or ways. Go to the farmer's market, the easy support small.
Or even if you can only go to the grocery store, it's like buying that pasture raised meat versus buying something that was factory farmed and never saw the light of day. Like, I think that's what people don't realize is like, when you're buying that like mystery meat at the market, like chances are they lived in a factory and they never saw grass. They never ran around. They were like shoulder to shoulder with another animal. And like that quality of life does totally affect the quality of meat that you're eating nutrition wise, and think about it energetically.
Spiritual wise.
Yes. So, I mean, that was a huge reason why I stopped eating meat. It was during my first 200 hour. I was like, okay, I'm not ingesting fear anymore. I'm just not eating meat. I love animals, and the way that we farm or the way that we raise meat in this country, like I'm just done. I can't do it. And I stopped eating meat for 6 years. Like, I mean, then I had some health things come up and I was needing that back in my life, but watching that documentary, Kiss the Ground, and also where we live played a huge part in changing my mind about it. Because when we hike here, a lot of time here and in Colorado, a lot of times we like hike by the cattle and they like live in there's no fences. There's no fences.
They're happy.
They're happy and they're living life the way they should be. They are in the sun, they're in pastures, they're eating grass and like whatever else on the side of a mountain. And it changed everything for me to start to look at it that way. And they're even living in the pasture, like they're giving back to the soil too.
I was just going to say, it's a beautiful cycle. It really is a beautiful cycle. And I think, it's so funny because I've had a couple of some time where I was raw vegan or this or that and just tried it all. And, you know, just now living where we do and how we do, it's like someone will call a Gardo and be, I don't eat pork just because I don't really, it's not a thing for me. I don't know, but someone in the neighborhood will call him and be like, hey, we're going to sacrifice a pig this weekend. Would you like to buy some pounds? So it's like, we know where it's coming from. It's a community thing, effort,
Yes.
and collaboration and cooperative. And I think that that is where we get so lost. And even when I actually learned this when I was in Peace Corps, I saw things happen that freaked me out, because I was, this is so funny, 6 years pescatarian. And then I come down here and I'm like trying cow stomach and this and all these different things, and, you know, learning more. And, you know, when I did go back to heifer, I learned so much from the facilitators there, so much. So that's another group, and the people there that I hold very close to my heart. One of the things when we would slaughter the broiler chickens, was saying a prayer of thanks over them. And I learned, like, when we would drop cattle off, it was the place, to the slaughterhouse. We went to that specific place because their machines were designed by someone that, you know, had this idea. I forget her name. I feel horrible because I want to be able to put the name to this, but actually hugs the animals before they're slaughtered. So it's not, like you were saying, a fear, like, scary event. And I think, you know, in some people's lives, it's not sustainable to eat a certain way, or this, you know, or it's just not a possibility. And I think respecting each other and respecting other cultures is a big part of it too.
Yes. And I think what's important to note about other cultures is, here in the United States, we throw away so much of the animal. Like,
Too
there
much.
is so much waste. In other cultures, like you said, they're using organs, they're eating and using every part of the animal. And I think it's so important to honor the animal in that way.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's been so important to me as coming into meat eating. Like, I've been making a lot of bone broth, and I
Yeah.
use throwaway parts of the animal. Like, people
Mhm.
have been seeing my Instagram posts of the chicken feet, and they absolutely lose their mind because it looks really weird. But it's like,
It's the best.
otherwise that would be thrown away. But that is a great source of collagen. Like,
Oh yeah.
everyone's
People
taking
here
like,
eat the feet.
oh yeah. Well, I have to
Yeah.
say, Scott does eat the feet when they're left over. I can't personally, that's not for me, but they're not going to
Yeah.
waste. Reuse.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's huge. And I think too, that's, you know, that's what our ancestors do. That's another thing I
Yes.
bring back to myself. Like, I do have Native American heritage as well. And it's like, okay, D, like, bring it back. Bring it back.
Yes. I
Yeah.
completely agree with that. Like, I tried to do a little ground beef with heart and liver mixed in, and
Mm,
the texture, I'm not there yet.
hard.
It's hard. It's a different
It's hard.
texture. And after not
Yeah.
eating meat for so long, this is even a whole new world for me, because I ate, I even before I was vegetarian, when I did eat meat, I was not a big red meat eater, and I was very, very picky. So I've never really been a meat eater. So we've started with supplements that are freeze dried marrow, liver, and
Hmm.
organs. And that's been a lot better
Hmm.
for me, to palatable, we'll say. But I
Yeah.
noticed a huge difference in starting to take those supplements. And where I'm getting at with this is, our ancestors, as close as our grandparents, the supplement industry there was no such thing. And when my mom tells stories about when she was pregnant with me and my brother and my sister, her grandmother was alive at the time. So my great grandmother, and
Mm.
she worked right near their house, and she would go there for lunch every day. And once or twice a week, she would either make her beef liver and like make her
Mhm.
eat it. And she would be like, this is for the baby. But they didn't have
Mhm.
supplements in their day. So that's how they got their nutrients. Like liver is packed with vitamin A, uh,
Huge.
like so many beneficial things for growing a baby. And so
That's what we ate this morning.
she was really onto something. And like I think of how far I turned away from that for a while, and now I'm starting to come back to that.
Ebbing and flowing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like when it's so interesting because to see here, like Edgardo's mom is like, all my grandkids eat chicken liver. It's like every time I drop the baby off at Abuela's casa, I know that like he's gonna get his dose of, all those nutrients packed and stuff. And so it's at first I was like, whoa, really? But that's the thing. Like I'm raising him here and helping him eat his sauerkraut and a chicken liver and getting that gut as healthy as we possibly can from a very, very young age. And that's one of the things that we're talking about liver. That's one of the things that we try to, of course, in a little body, eating too much of it can be toxic. So you have to be careful about that. But it's interesting to see, because down here it's not very supplementy either.
No. Yeah.
And so that's what they do.
Yep.
Yeah.
So my brother was like the star grandchild on both sides because he was not a picky eater and he would eat whatever my grandparents put in front of them. And like I said, my dad was born and raised in Italy and on a farm. So his parents really, they didn't get Americanized easily. I would say that they weren't ever Americanized. And so whatever my grandmother would cook, my brother he wouldn't ask questions. He would just eat it. And me and my other cousins, we were like the picky ones. So she would like hate that, but he was the one that was eating the chicken gizzards and like tripe and whatever they put in front of him. And so he was like the golden boy.
How is his gut now? Is he super healthy?
So it's funny because he did go through some things, but I think I'm trying to think of how to word this. I think it was very anxiety related. Like he wasn't ever a school kid and he was confined in this way of learning that didn't really work for him and the way that his brain worked. And I think how it translated was a lot of anxiety. And so he did have stomach issues for a little, but I think it was more so because of also what we eat now, in that things are more processed. There's more chemicals. And even though our grandparents didn't become Americanized, my dad and his brothers very much did. And they just wanted to assimilate really. And I think that like push pull definitely had an effect. But now I'd be curious. I'm going to ask him, how's your gut doing?
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, you're spot on with like, there's so many things that have to do with gut. I had a friend who was asking me about her daughter and she had just transitioned, had her child during the pandemic, started working from home, had the baby. And then all of a sudden she's working in an office, however many days a week now. And her daughter started having, her tummy was bothering her. And so it's like, she's like, what can I feed her? What am I feeding her that's maybe bothering her? And we came to the conclusion, like, I think she came to the conclusion herself. She's, a great mother. And she was like, it's the transition, so like that anxiety of not having mommy there, or, just that's all there. It's, it's our second or our first brain, according to some people, is our belly.
Yeah, I totally believe that it is. If you want to get to the root of all your health issues, like heal your gut.
Yes. Amen. Yeah.
And I have had challenges with that. When I was little, I had chronic strep throat, but no one knew what it was. So it went undiagnosed for basically, I would say probably the first time it happened to me, I was probably around 2.5, 3. And I didn't get my tonsils out until I was 7. So it went on for
Wow.
roughly 5 years. And they treated me for everything. I was like on antibiotics, but not the right antibiotics. So it wasn't treating the actual
Oh,
issue. They treated me for parasites. I was like constantly on medications. And I noticed that I definitely had a gut issue in my 20s, also kind of anxiety related. It kind of, everything comes to a head at once.
yeah, of course.
I was in the midst of a very abusive, awful relationship, like completely toxic. And all of this stuff started to bubble up for me. And this was like my second deep dive into overall health and wellness. Like one of those things was like getting out of that relationship. And then I had all of these gut issues from anxiety from years of all of this medication. So it was like, okay, now how do I heal my gut? And that's when I got into fermenting. I made my own sourdough, and learning about all of those good bacterias and how to ferment was so healing for me. And it's like, it's just that experience. Like I turned my kitchen into a complete science experiment. Like I even tried to make my own ginger ale by making my own ginger bug. And
wow.
yeah. So actually, this is a really funny story. So I had my ginger bug going and I decided that I was going to make ginger ale. So I had 2 glass gallon jugs that were my grandfather's that he used to use for his wine. And my brother and I exploded them in our kitchen while we were learning how to make ginger ale. And they went off. They went off like a bomb, and it was in the middle of the night. So we like kind of heard something while we were sleeping, but like we both didn't think about it. And then in the morning we were like, oh, did you hear that last night? And I was like, yeah, what was that? And he's like, I don't know. And then we go downstairs to the kitchen and there is ginger ale and like ginger bug dripping from the ceiling, from like light fixtures, from cabinets. It was, 2 gallons of fermented ginger, like basically everywhere.
Oh my gosh.
So it's so funny to think about like how powerful those good bacterias are.
Oh yeah. And just to give like sciencey about it, like you have, I don't like to say like good and bad. You have beneficial bacteria and you have opportunistic bacteria. And our guts, our stomachs, our organs, we should be having a balance of 80 beneficial and 20 opportunistic. And in most people in the Western society, it's the opposite.
Wow, that's crazy to think about.
It is crazy to think about. And the beautiful thing is that our bodies want to heal. Our bodies want to heal. And is like, just to bring everything full circle, like when you show up for yourself in that way, it's gonna be the best. It's gonna be so beneficial, and your body will thank you for paying attention to it.
Yes. And I think that is so important to note too, is like health is big picture. Like we need to stop compartmentalizing health and start looking at health as in all of these facets, because your physical health could be great, but if your mental and emotional health are not there, it's like, it's going to throw everything off. And that goes for each piece of it. Like if your physical health is off, well, guess what? Your mental and emotional health is probably off too. And and that's why for so many, yoga is the gateway, right? Because we start practicing these physical asanas, and maybe we start dabbling in meditation, and a whole new world opens up, really.
It does. And it's a beautiful first step.
Yes. And just it's scary to take that first step, or even to be a beginner. Like I see so many people adverse to trying something new. And I used to teach a yoga 101 class, and to see those people step in every day was so inspiring, because it's so hard to take that first step. But once you do,
with anything.
Yes.
With anything.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what changed my mind about that is, so I was teaching this Yoga 101 class for so long, and I kind of like lost what it meant to be a beginner. And one of my cousins brought me rock climbing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had the opportunity to be a beginner again.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, this is what people feel when they're stepping into my classroom. Like I got that feeling all over again. Cause like, obviously I was a beginner at yoga once too. And I was so adverse to it. I had an aunt figure who, since I was like 12, was telling me like, you should do yoga. And I was like, not for me, not for me, not for me, until eventually I went to a class with one of my best friends, and it just, I was like, I had that experience where it's like, oh, there's something here. Like, this is it. And I got completely hooked.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if there's one takeaway that you want listeners to take away from this episode featuring you, what would it be? There's so much good stuff, so it's hard.
Yeah. Calm your central nervous system. Do what you have to do. Find, explore, get curious about who you are, and calm your central nervous system. It's going to help all of those facets of health that we, spiritual, mental, emotional, physical. Calm the central nervous system and your life will change.
Yeah. I think that's when the intuition starts talking.
Yeah.
And sometimes it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, sometimes it doesn't, and you're not going to figure it out till later. And I think it's, in the world we're living in right now, and especially after the past couple of years, so many of us have a dysregulated nervous system. So I think, and this teaching it to the young generations as well is something, that's part of the reason why I'm so passionate about it, is because I wish that I had, a yoga facilitator or a pranayama facilitator, in moments of anxiety when I was really little, like how to breathe or take a deep breath or tools like that. So, calm your central nervous system, inspire others around you to do the same, and just love on each other.
Yeah. Kindness goes a long way.
Yeah. Just love on each other.
And lastly, what is one of the best pieces of advice you received?
Oh God, I don't even remember. I think you asked this on the form and I don't even remember what I wrote, because I feel like there's just something new every day. I'm like, oh God, yes. I would say, I think I mentioned this in the conversation, make your healing journey. Don't do it alone. Seek mentors, try different healing modalities, find community in it, for yourself, and magical things will happen. So just don't do it alone. You're not alone. You don't have to do it alone.
That is like the theme of this podcast. And that is really why I wanted to give a platform, not just for myself, but for other people, because I know, and that I've been talking about this. I'm not for everyone. And that's okay. But that's
okay.
But I want to highlight other people that might help them on their journey. So it might not be me, and that's fine. But there are so many amazing people doing this work. So find what works for you, because you're not alone. There are resources out there, and there's a community for you. And like you said in the beginning of the podcast, when the teacher is ready, the student appears, and vice versa. When the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Just be willing and be open to opportunities, and be willing to receive, throw those palms in the air, speak it to spirit, and allow it to come in. Because when you do open your heart space, when you do open your mental space, it creates a place for other things to come in. So
yeah. And having an open mind is important, because when you do ask for it, it might not come in exactly how you think it should look.
Yeah. Yeah. Should is an asshole.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What are your offerings? And if people want to connect with you, where can they find you?
Sure. So I am just, let's see
A little bit of
how, I don't
everywhere.
want to do a word vomit. Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully this episode will help give a little dabble of things. As you know, I call myself the heart and health guide. So whether you're looking for a mentor to help you bring you home to yourself, I do one-on-one gut practitioner and holistic health coaching sessions. And if you need yoga, if you need meditation, I can do that virtually. I do have offerings here physically in Panama as well. And when I'm planning to go back to the States next year, hopefully we'll be able to
I
meet up
know,
and
because
do
it's around the
something.
same time, right?
Yeah, our siblings are getting married. We have things to do, but like
Well,
we've got to have some offerings.
yeah, I will totally make time. I'm gonna probably, it's funny, I was just talking to my mom about this, but I'll probably be there for like 2-ish weeks, I think. We'll
Yeah,
keep it shorter
we'll
this
figure it
time.
out. Yeah,
Uh,
we'll figure it out. It'll be
Colorado is
fun.
already calling me.
Yeah. Oh,
If you want to make
yeah.
a little detour before you go home.
Oh my God, I would, but I'm like already a little nervous about getting on a plane with a 2-year-old. So it's gonna be interesting.
You have the
Um,
tools.
but
It'll be fine.
yeah, it'll be good. But yeah, you can find me on Instagram at anahata.yoga.bienestar, and that's BIENESTAR.
And I'll link it in the show
Okay.
notes too for you.
Okay, you see me spelling it out. And my personal one is I am Deirdre Lee, and that's more of like I like to write poetry and just kind of other musings and stuff. I talk more about just more personal things. I'll probably start doing subscription to like the behind the scenes of our homestead
Oh my
there. So if
gosh,
anyone's
I'm so
in
in.
that, yeah. So if anyone's interested in that, that's probably going to be popping up soon. And there's in the link in the Anahata Yoga and the Instagram, there's for my email is in there, I think, as well. So there's a few different ways you can reach out.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dee, for being on. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I feel honored.
Of course. I'll have you back if you want.
Oh yeah, bring it on. Well, I was also a podcast virgin, so
I love this. I'm popping
thank you for the
everyone's
opportunity.
podcast cherry.
Yes, bring it on.
For those of you listening, thank you for being here. This was the Nearly Enlightened podcast. If you are listening on YouTube, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe. And for everywhere else, please give us 5 stars if you enjoyed this show. And I'll see you next week.